members of this conference. We're part of the Latin American economic system of the Caribbean. Here, we're part of the American states in the Caribbean. We'd like to thank all the representatives of the system. We welcome you all. Now, we have the presence of many professors, and I want to welcome you all. We're going to be discussing these important activities today. We welcome you all to the seminar. It's about the investment model and the risks that we are facing in Latin America and the Caribbean. We all acknowledge what's happening in our region. We know that we've been highly affected because of COVID-19. The contingency has made us go to one of the territories that's extremely complex. We are trying to help those, and we're trying to level the number of dead people that we've faced here. Sorry, we're having some technical audio problems here. We're trying to solve them. As a consequence, this has affected the global economy, and it's had great consequences in our societies. The global economy declined in 4.3% in 2020. And in Latin America and the Caribbean, the GDP, I believe it's around 11%. We received some executive reports of the OCDE, and the economic crisis is part of the sanitary crisis. And amidst the pandemic, we faced complex challenges that will have to guide us to recover economically. However, we have tried to build and continue growing economically using the region's resources. These are risks that are not very frequent. However, the economic situation, the environmental issues, and other situations about our passions in Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2020, I'll tell you that it was 10.6. So around 30 million people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have lost their jobs. And there's many vulnerable populations that have been highly affected. In this seminar, we're going to be discussing very important issues in this joint effort of the Inter-American Conference on Social Security that's part of the Latin American economic system and the Caribbean. In Latin America, what we have to do is that we have to find an opportunity to continue administrating and managing the risk, providing humanitarian assistance, creating an alliance with representative officials that lead social security schemes and programs. So being so is extremely important to all participate. There's many experiences and response mechanisms before the contingencies that we faced in our countries, which will enable us to draft the landscape of what's happening with our societies in a region. The risk management plan or model is something that we have to think together based on the social protection systems that we've been developing in Latin America and the Caribbean. These plans need to be adapted or adjusted to the conditions of the populations which are vulnerable. Now, from the Inter-American Conference on Social Security, we are here celebrating this joint effort, this joint initiative that works for the economic system in Latin America, trying to protect the economies of the Latin American states and the Caribbean. In this system, we've had important regional efforts and we've had many workshops. We will continue working to protect Social Security and social security schemes in the America. to improve environmental, economic, and health conditions of our people. Now, amidst the pandemic, 2019, I think all the systems have been put to trial to in all the aspects we've been working. We're trying to improve the specific area of health. We've been facing different details. It's a complex pandemic where they were listening about the fact that there's going to be a third wave, and there's economic effects and social issues and problems that we have been all facing. On behalf of the Inter-American Conference, once again, we'd like to welcome you all to our seminar. And I'll open the floor for the secretary, the permanent secretary of the Caribbean and Latin American system, Mr. Paulini. The floor is yours, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you so much. Have a great day, all of you. Uh, all the ministries, justices, Guadarrama, the representatives of chairwomen and chairmen, representatives of ELAC, Ms. Daisy Corrales Diaz, president of the Inter-American Center of Studies on Social Security, of the Inter-American Conference on Social Security, Ma'am Veronica Zamudio. She's in research of the CIS. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the secretary, on behalf of the permanent secretariat of the Latin American System of the Caribbean, CELA, I welcome you all to this workshop, this seminar that has been consolidated in alliance in this partnership with the Inter-American Conference on Social Security and the Community of Latin American States, ELAC, and the Caribbean. This joint initiative proves that it's extremely important for us in our three bodies to pay close attention and joint efforts in common interest for this region. We're going to be capable of working together to find solutions and contribute and improve the life conditions of our populations. Reality is that disasters may impact the well being of our people in different dimensions, leaving its worst sequels in those vulnerable groups. If the threats due to different natural phenomenons are unavoidable, as we've witnessed amidst the present context with the epidemic at a global planetary scalability of it, and we're facing its development, we can mitigate risks using the risk mitigation response if we know the threats well, and if we face our vulnerabilities adequately in the prone sectors that are facing the impact of social risks. In our region, we have developed contingency plans, but what's true is that in extreme magnitudes, we might not be ready, like for situations such as COVID-19, to exercise and go through the assessment of the policies that have been implemented in the region when administrating risks as disasters. I mean, this is proof that we're here gathered as an excellent panel. The CELA, and along with the CIS and CELAC, these three bodies want to take this even further in its management. We want to protect our population using the preventive measures. We need the response mechanisms and answers. We need to incorporate a third element when managing crisis and the risks. We're focusing on social protection, on the protection, and we're including social security. The success of a management of this source or dimension must have coherent planning and participation of different stakeholders that work with the plan to mitigate risks and disasters. That's why it's so important to identify the areas in which we're vulnerable and react as a consequence with the proper instruments in which we have the development plans to work jointly amongst our sectors. I am convinced that only if we're correctly articulated as entities, we will only then be capable of drafting policies that lead us to mitigate risks and create resiliency. By doing this, we can reduce our society's vulnerabilities, economic vulnerabilities, and environmental vulnerabilities. We want to improve the general well-being of our populations amidst the seminar, and I'm sure this seminar is an excellent opportunity to face complex themes such as these, but it's necessary for all of Latin American countries and Caribbean countries to do so. The themes or the core topics should be part of our national policies and acts. We need to have the human capital, technical resources, financial resources to achieve our objective. As it's been mentioned in the 2020 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We will now open the floor for Mr. Efrain Guadarrama Perez, National Coordinator of Mexico at CELAC. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Welcome all of the participants in this seminar. We've been thinking about the risk plan to be used in Latin America and the Caribbean. We're trying to work for those vulnerable. At CELAC, we're working with the Inter-American Conference on Social Security and the Latin American Economic System for the Caribbean. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Daisy Corrales Diaz, chairwoman of the Inter-American Center of Social Security Studies of CES, and the ambassador, my dear friend, Javier Paulinici. He's the permanent secretary of SEC. Now, I respectfully thank all of the representatives and panel members who have accepted kindly to be part of the seminar organized between these three institutions. In this seminar, we're going to be discussing the risk management plans for Latin America and the Caribbean. As a chairman of CELAC in Mexico, for me, it's an honor to be part of the opening ceremony of this workshop and this effort to cooperate, which gives us great value amidst the pandemic. We've witnessed what happened last year. We face contingencies facing natural disasters as well. As it's been mentioned, element by element, is of our particular interest to analyze the responses of the countries for their societies amidst COVID-19 emergencies. Now, we have the right level of development. We are thinking about other risks that might arise. Now, the seminar frames the work plan for 2021. The plan has been approved and voted for by all the members during January this year. With this plan, we will kick off the axis strategies of CELAC, integrating the draft. Under the framework, we have 3 seminars online, and we will draft and write different instruments in which we will see what's happening in the risks in Latin America. We work with member countries at CELAC, and there's different representatives or stakeholders from the private sector, strategic centers. We are working for nourishment and housing and other specialized entities, bodies that will work to uh, mitigate risk on behalf of risk of CES. At CELAC, I want to celebrate the opening and the trust that we have given all of the stakeholders of these economies. We've celebrated many times before. We're open to dialogue. We're working jointly. And it's part of what we're doing at CELAC. We work for the integration of Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much. We're going to be introducing the moderator of the following activity, Veronica Samilio Santos. Miss She is an urban expert, environmental expert from Colegio de Mexico. She has a master's in regional development thanks to the College. She's worked in Nayarit. She's also been part of NGOs or non-government organizations working in different sectors. She's fought for gender equality, water access in different communities. She's also been a professor of Nayarit's Autonomous University. Currently, it's our honor for us to have her as part of our research team on Social Security Studies Conference. Thank you so much, Veronica, and you're managing and coordinating, moderating this seminar. We have formally gone through the opening ceremony. We thank all the stakeholders, part of SELECT and the rest of the bodies. We're all working jointly for the integration of Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'd like to thank you all. If it's appropriate and if you think it's right, we'd like all of you to take or turn on your camera so we can take the formal, official, institutional photograph. Okay, in a moment, we're going to be taking that picture. Well, good morning once again. I'd like to profit from the opportunity we have to greet you all and welcome you warmly. Thanks, Mr. Raul. Thank you for the presence of the representatives of United Nations. I know we're all working to mitigate risks. We're here hosting, and you're part of this great event. We'll want to remind you that we're broadcasting live in English and Spanish. We're being transmitted live via YouTube and Facebook. In the Facebook Live, when it's streaming, you have to connect through the SEAS account that's at seas.org.esp. And in this case, it would be in Spanish. In the YouTube channel, we have the Economic Latin American System of the Caribbean, CELAC, CELAC. That's going to be the channel in which we'll transmit in English. The methodology of this event will be consisting on the following. There's going to be a series of questions that we will pose to our panel members, and we're going to focus on three main themes: the lack of fairness and equality, inclusive focuses, and multi sector participation. The questions that we will pose will have to be answered by your panel members in no more than 3 minutes. Afterwards, we're going to have the room or time for Q&A from our audience who are present with us today. Okay, so we're going to begin by briefly reading the bios of those who are members of the panel today. I'll begin with Elizabeth Riley. She is the executive director of the Caribbean body that is in charge of managing disasters. It's called CDEMA. From May 2020, she became the executive director, chairwoman, and since 2020, she has over 20 years of experience when facing and managing risks at a regional level at a global scale. She has a degree in geography thanks to the Occidental Indies University, a professor in the field of environment, and she's a member of the Manchester University. We have the presence of Lydia from SEA. She was voted for to lead the project of Mesoamerica's development during 2019-2023. She has a solid professional development, master's, and dissertation. She's a PhD. She has a broad experience in social policies, international cooperation. Prior to this, she's been working as vice minister in social policies in the Ministry of the Honduran Social Security Ministry. We also have the presence of Almarina Cardelli. She's an extraordinary ambassador or representative of the Republic of Argentina. She presides the commission of the White Helmets, that's part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Commerce, International Commerce, since February 28th, 2020. Ambassador Cardelli also manages the team that's focusing on studying foreign policies, the Development Center. She's also co-director of an entity called Genera. We also have the participation of Minor Mejia Andrade, who is the chairwoman or chairman of one of the entities that focuses on work risk prevention from Guatemala on Social Security. He's a surgeon with an area of expertise of occupational medicine. He has a master on public health and a master in risk preventions at the workplace. He's also a member of the National Risk Council or board and works for occupational areas and coordinates and faces the plan to mitigate risks in Guatemala. We also have the presence of Mr. Carlos Zapata, the director or chairman of the Cabinet on Social Policies of the Executive Power of the Dominican Republic. He has a degree in international affairs. He's also an attorney and has studied administration. Well, now that we've introduced each one of our panel members, we're going to begin with a set of questions. We'll start with a question. And then we expect your responses in the order in which I've introduced the panel members. The first question is the following. It's about coordinating multiple sectors. And the question is the following. To have the proper response before COVID-19, we have required the coordination of multiple sectors. How can we broaden our efforts to coordinate our efforts amongst our sectors, which by tradition have been working on managing social environmental risks with the sectors that are in charge of social services and goods. Elizabeth Riley, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Muchas gracias a todos, a la señora moderadora, gracias a todos por invitar a CEDEM a ser parte de este debate tan importante con respecto al COVID-19. En marzo 2 del 2021, la Agencia de Seguridad Caribeña, ventiló sus indicadores entre sus miembros, estados miembros, que son 26. Tenemos 196,000 casos de COVID-19, que nos da una cifra de más de 200,000. Bueno, esos estados miembros, que son 26, son parte de nuestra comunidad. Bueno, nos hace hablar que el COVID-19, como usted lo ha indicado, requiere el involucramiento de la sociedad, del sector público y privado y la sociedad civil.
In context, SEDEMA, through its arrangements under our comprehensive disaster management strategy, has always promoted a multi-sectoral governance arrangement for treating various hazards. And this approach was also applied in the context of COVID-19. So when we talk about how do we expand the collaboration and coordination between these two groups, we have to recognize that social protection in itself is intrinsically linked to shock response. And traditionally, we have used social protection to strengthen the people's ex-ante risk management capacity. And what we have seen is that there's a growing body of evidence of the role that social protection can also play in responding to or in ex-post situations for a range of emergencies, including COVID-19. So what we would recommend is related to having very robust governance arrangements which promote participation by vulnerable groups. It is very important that there's a space for the voice of the vulnerable groups to be heard and for this to influence the decisions that are taking place. And specifically with respect to that interface between those entities that deal with risk management and those that deal with social protection, we do believe it is important to have a better understanding of each other's space. From the risk management side, for us to better understand existing social protection systems and how these can be scaled up to support the national level arrangements for addressing COVID-19. But equally, it is important for social protection actors to also understand how the risk management arrangements work. So in essence, we do believe that the national coordination arrangements, similar to what have been established under our comprehensive disaster management approach, which is applied in all of our participating states, offers an excellent governance space for that type of interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. Lydia from the floor is yours. Thank you very much, ma'am, moderator. We greet you all. Today we're here trying and discussing important issues. We have evidence, we have bulk evidence about how the pandemic has demanded from each and every one of us to interact and to coordinate the efforts, to give the proper response, make front to it. Stakeholders and the groups that have been mentioned and that have been called to this first stage or segment, I mean, in normal conditions, maybe the entities involved didn't look for each other as we have to do now, but we've seen how we have had to open to dialogue and contribute with our initiatives. There's a lot of action to fight back and make front to this pandemic. Now, we think that being capable of being close is positive, but we have to work jointly, going through these cumbersome efforts. Mainly, what's of vital importance is for us to use IT technology to communicate. In the science of computer science, we have to tighten the bond, tighten our efforts, tighten these joint ventures. We have many examples. We've suffered during November in Central American countries 2 hurricanes of great magnitude that impacted our countries while we were also having to deal with the effects of the pandemic. So we saw how the private sector united to the public sector. And in this joint effort, both sectors try to make front to the negative, disastrous impacts. And we saw also the scholars participating actively, contributing with their initiatives with hard data. So, what is happening in a cross-corrupt landscape of things? What are we all stakeholders doing as a team? We're using technology. We're using as computer science or informatic systems. Now the favorable scenario that we have available, we have geo-reference systems, we have geodata that can help us all to be closer, to work together as groups, to go through the proper decision-making process, and the decisions should be intelligent, based on hard data, objective data. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Okay, now the floor is for Mariana Cardelli. Hello, how are you? I was not, I was still muted. So I will give you my greetings from Argentina. I really thank you for the invitation. And the first consideration I want to share with you is that, it's been more than a year ever since the WHO declared this as a pandemic, and we're really worried that the humanitarian context in the Caribbean, in Latin America, we share this preoccupation, and I focus on the humanitarian context because, as you know, I'm the president of Cascos Blancos, which is the international Argentinian management body. And we deal with this. Besides this, we're permanently articulating and, looking at the region with certain worries, and we have to rethink which are our risk management policies when we see the great impact in our peoples, in our countries, because we have a great amount of weaknesses. The inequities, structural inequities, are deeper every day. So with a future that will intensify these catastrophes of all kinds, this is a very important warning, considering biological as well as the pandemic threaten, and some other examples that somebody else mentioned that we have simultaneously coped with. So it's a warning so that the economic and political and integration processes that we boost in the world will not weaken the capability of a response by the states. And that's a big challenge, and the multi-sectorial coordination specifically dealing with, in order to build this state strength and the coordination with the community and the private sector in order to be strong, we have to take note of all those learnings. And one of the greatest learnings we had in Argentina, at least the experience in our country, was the coordination at several levels, In the case of Cascos Blancos, this emergency had gave us the challenge to give these assistance that we give internationally. We have to give this nationally. Then there were 17 missions of humanitarian assistance that would have been impossible without the coordination that I'm talking about. And first of all, the Inter-Ministerial Coordination, to give a concrete example, to repatriate the 250,000 Argentinian people overseas, we coordinated the Foreign Affairs Ministry and the Armed Forces, the Ministry of Transportation, the Ministry of Health, the Providence governments. They all got together, and I think this happened in all countries. But one of the strategies of response of the repatriation strategy implied the coordination overnight, interministerial coordination for more than 6 national ministries and all the places in the country, and this had to be done overnight. This interministerial coordination somehow talks to us about the perspective of the management of risks, where we say the capability of response is necessarily from all the areas of the state and the areas of the society. One more concrete example to talk about this coordination topic is the assistance, the integral assistance given by the state in Argentina arrived to the most vulnerable people because there were organized communities, and we were able to help them because of it wouldn't have been possible for the government to identify every individual for the access to many specific assistance policies to every place in the country without the organization of the society, which were the arm of the state policies to build this prevention and the answers to these disasters. Somehow, our president, Alberto Fernandez, said it, and it was said also by our minister, Carla Dizotti, to think of a model of response to the risks, particularly those biological threats, or maybe think of a model of response to emergencies that would not be the integrity of policies from all sectors, but also in the territories of the organized communities, making these state policies feasible. And without this coordination, it would be very difficult. And this made us think of an open and genuine dialogue with the presence of these organizations, So we had to think of the coordination of policies, but these policies will be done through the organized community and not only through the state, so that we have to be ready for future threats. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marina Cardelli. I remind you that I will repeat the question that you're answering: how we can widen the coordination between the sectors that traditionally deal with the management of risks, of environmental risks or social risks, or the sectors that are dealing with social services. And I also remind you that through the YouTube channel, we are having the simultaneous interpretation and the simultaneous retransmission by the Facebook and YouTube channel by CELAC. And your questions may be through Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube chats. Now I'll give the floor to Malinov. Please, the floor is yours. I think he's muted. We cannot hear you, sorry. Your microphone has been muted. Please. Oh, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm Dr. Cambranes, boss of the Department of Preventive Medicine of the Guatemaltecan Institute of Social Security. Dr. Minor Mejia is to my left. He will be talking, but also I just wanted to say hi on behalf of the president of President Carlos Contreras and Mr. Mario Martis and Dr. Arturo Garcia Kim. They had something to do, but they would have loved to be with you in order to participate from this seminar, which is risk management. So I will leave Dr. Minor Mejia with you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you and participate in this excellent panel, which is a very important topic regarding social security. For it is very important because we're going to talk about some experiences that we had to deal with this pandemic. But definitely, the multisectoral coordination is basic and fundamental for every response we may have. Our experience as a structure gives us a social security a lot of capability of management we have because we have a directive or we have the academy and the finance sector and the population, and that gives us an internal capability of response. But when we face this COVID-19 pandemic, we had to definitely come to talk to other institutions in order to face this. And the leadership was by the Public Health Ministry, along with the Economy Ministry and the Labor Ministry. So we had to multisectorally coordinate with them, which in the beginning, we have to be honest, it was pretty difficult, mainly because of communication that we didn't have well established in the beginning. We didn't have experience in order to work together in this kind of events. But it was only through the National Coordination of Disasters, which is the entity in the country, that all these institutions come together and then we give answer to all these kind of disasters that we face. Nevertheless, we believe and we're sure that Social Security has a fundamental role for the answer of these kind of events, even though the people affiliated only take the 20% of the economically active population. They do represent many more, many of the questions that have to do with services in the industry that we have to give an answer to. And they demand an answer from us as Social Security for this kind of events and this kind of pandemic that we faced. So we did not only have the demands from our affiliates, but we also had the demand from the country. And together with that, and with the ministries, we had to work hard and fast. And in the beginning, it was pretty difficult because we didn't have experience. But later on, I will tell you that we had a National Commission for the Prevention of COVID, and it was coordinated by the presidents of the Republic, where my institute also participated, and we went orderly. But in the beginning, it was pretty difficult to have this match with the different institutions because we didn't have neither the preparation nor the previous experience to deal with what kind of a crisis like this. So I think this is fundamental. And later on, we're going to talk about some experiences that we had where what we learned is that now we're sure that we're better prepared for any coming event. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minor Mejia, for your participation. Now we're going to give the floor to Carlos Zapata from the Dominican Republic. It seems like we have some technical issues with his connection. So I think we're going to go for the next question. First of all, before we go to the next question, I think it is important to say that in the framework of Sendai, part of the Sendai principles for the prevention of disasters, we have an emphasis in the participation of all the sectors from all levels in the government of the states in order to promote the governance and risk management of disasters, which I believe has been something that has been present during the responses of panelists. So now let's go to the next question, which is dealing with inequities. And next questions is, according to the last report of human development of the PNUD, the reason why the disasters cause inequities is the previously existing inequity. How can we adapt the risk management model to influence in the reality of inequity that we share in the Latin American and the Caribbean region, considering that we're talking about the most unequal region in the world? The floor is for Mrs. Elizabeth Rayleigh.
Thank you again,
Muchas
Madam
gracias
Chair.
nuevamente, señora coordinadora.
Indication
De acuerdo con la indicación, disculpen, no estoy teniendo una buena conexión, no le escucho correctamente.
is a very
Okay.
question that has been
Es una
raised.
pregunta que ha surgido. No llega bien su audio, disculpen.
Sorry, for some reason I'm
por
hearing the Spanish interpretation. Okay, thank you. So I was saying that it is absolutely correct to say that the disasters exacerbate inequality. And the real question is why? And that is because within certain segments of our population, with particular individuals, because of their income levels or other social factors, they have limited capacities, including limited resources. So if we're discussing how we adapt the risk management model, I think a very critical aspect of that is to have a more robust treatment of the area of social vulnerability in the risk assessment process. And of course, this does not discount the importance of looking at physical and economic vulnerability, but what it means is that we need to look at social vulnerability in a more comprehensive context. Specifically, we have to zero in on social impacts to these individuals in the population. It means a deeper examination of social indicators such as income levels, access of these individuals to basic services, access to social protection mechanisms. How does attitude and culture factor into the issue of social vulnerability, and what types of social capital might exist within these populations and individuals? I also think an important component is really disaggregating socially vulnerable groups. So in many instances, we may tend to think of the socially vulnerable as a one single grouping. Of course, they are not. They can be disaggregated and looked at through the lens of poverty, through the lens of gender, age, health, class, disabilities, who leads the households. So from my perspective, I think it is important in revisiting how we are looking at the issues of risk and looking at social vulnerability to give very specific attention to the nuances of the social vulnerability that exists within the specific disaggregated groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Elizabeth Rayleigh. Now the floor is for Mrs. Lydia Frum. Thank you very much. I believe the question is a very important one, and I wish to start to reflect starting from a reality. And in our region, we're characterized by three conditions. We are a region with a lot of inequities. We're also a region that has a lot of inequities, and we're also considered the second region, which is the most vulnerable planet after Asia. So let's imagine these conditions And then let's add up the social risks. Then we'll clearly going to need to overcome these negligences. The social risks as equals as the risks by natural disasters are caused by negligences, and these negligences impact our population, and they continue to build these vulnerability factors, and this results in great losses of lives, infrastructure, economy, and the habitats, the many, many things that make us go back. So, for example, and just to illustrate, before the impact of two hurricanes in less than 10 days, the statistics of our countries that were affected indicate that we have gone back 10 years. So we cannot think of development if we have this kind of situations and we go back constantly due to these uh, impacts. So, due to the growing social risks and the risks that these provoke and the impacts in our populations, we do need to have these multi sectorial approaches, and we need in a multi-actor approach to set functions and responsibilities to define roles in the regions, and then we will need to have an integral approach for monitoring and follow up. The advantage is that we have information systems, we have georeferenced data, and we have technologies that may help us to have this integral follow up as well as the approaches. And the second goal for the Sendai framework that was mentioned by our moderator require a greater knowledge of the risk, but also a comprehension of the risk. And then these, when we we will boost this, we will be able to have the actual citizenship, to have their integral management of the disaster. So we can go forward in these using geodata, IT, and georeference data, because unidentified risks and not managed will be an announced disaster. This is a very important principle that we have to consider in the proposals as well as in the response schemes that we may have and give to our populations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lydia From. Now the floor is for Ms. Marina Cardelli. Thank you very much. When there is inequity, the impact is also unequal, and it'll be greater for those that have less. And this has been evident in the whole continent with the pandemic, and it's been evident in Argentina, and it's been evident during this COVID situation. It's just an example, the gender inequity, just to name one. In our country, as you know, it was acknowledged by the program of the UN for the development for ONU women as public policies for the women, and we're proud for this because it's the result of a lot of work and the struggle of many women. Just with the preventive and mandatory social distancing, there were many calls for the to the line of protection and for women. So it ended up to be a prison for those women that were under a violent situation. The second problem that social distancing had, or lockdown, whose was to protect the population, had an impact in the popular neighborhoods where there are many people in the same room or people that do not have any resources. So a protective measurement resulted to a greater exposition to the virus for those that were having some housing vulnerabilities. And the same thing happened with the autonomous workers and formal workers of popular economy that were in an, you know, on an unequal situation compared to the people that would be working or, staying home and receiving a salary. So something that we learned during the last year is the capability of response and the warranty of resilience in our countries is based up on quality health services, solid labor benefits or rights, have a development of technology. And that is to say that the inequities generate unequal impacts, and the responses must transmit these differentiating characteristics. We cannot respond the same way to unequal situations. So the perspective of the differential response is a responsibility of mitigation, of prevention, and end up with the inequities going towards social justice, because that's our commitment for the agenda of 2030 of sustainable development and the Sendai framework that says that vulnerability increase the risks of the population, but it also implies strategies to for the recovery of these people. So inequity as a factor, as a variable, has to allow us to think of mitigation and policies that will guarantee the access to rights before the disasters of threats, but also during and after these disasters and threats. So that would be it, and say that risk management of disasters, if we understand it as a complex that goes in this sense with all these elements, and together with social policies that search for social justice, we will be able to think of resilience strategies that will deal with these inequities and will try to transform them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Now the floor is open for Mr. Minor Mejia, please. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to adhere myself to the previous thoughts of Ms. Maria Cardelli, which I think are fundamental, the way she's expressed it about equity, fairness, and vulnerable people. My response is led that same way on that path. I mean, us in Guatemala, we're highly vulnerable due to natural disasters and the way our society is constituted. If you consider, you've known that we're one of the Latin American countries that have the highest levels of illiteracy. We have a lot of kids that are dying because of a lack of nutrition. Our kids don't have access to healthcare services. They're limited. If we consider that our population, our indigenous populations is 55% of our population, total population, and they're in remote rural areas. And we have to consider also, as I've said prior to this, that only 18 or 19% of the active economic people have access to Social Security. I'll tell you that yes, well, basically, we're highly vulnerable. And as Ms. Cardelli said, we have to react upon realities. Usually, when we draft a contingency plan to provide support, when it's drafted, we don't consider these elements, which are basic. It's also highly important to mention that if we are mindful about these elements, I mean, with goodwill, things can improve. For example, if we want to face the situations in my country, we face a disaster, a pandemic, a natural disaster in my country. Well, basically, we're not going to have days, we're going to have days in which there's no communication, no infrastructure to give support to our people. So prior to this, we have to draft proper policies, draft programs, schemes that give access to the different communities that we have, because it's vital. It's been explained. Those people that have less economic possibilities are the ones that are highly affected and will always be the ones that are affected worst. We have to plan out this in an integrating context. We can't just be seen as a vulnerable country due to social situations that should have been surpassed. One of the situations that we need to improve is education, infrastructure, basic access to healthcare services in general. And I must also mention that social security. We can't develop a country that's in development without social security for its labor force. There's no social justice without social security. It's fundamental for us to think about these elements and have a broader perspective. We have to submit guidelines for improvement, but what's basic in general, we need to work on infrastructure, education, and access to healthcare services. We must take into account and consider the actions that will follow and how we're going to lead this effort towards that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for the respect and for the sake of time. Thank you for sticking to the 3-minute times we have to respond the questions. Carlos Zapata has the floor. He's from Dominican Republic. Please go ahead, sir. We can't hear you, sir. Your microphone is muted. We cannot hear you. Okay. Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, sir. Loud and clear. Good afternoon. I'd like to open the floor by first sharing one of my presentations. To begin, I'd like to be representing Dominican Republic as part of our panel. Sir, 1 second, please. Now, the question that we have just asked, because we're following a sequence of a set of questions specifically, is how could we adapt the risk management models to have an impact in our common realities in the Latin American regions and in the Caribbean? I mean, what's highlighted here, unfortunately, is that our regions has a high level of inequality. Sir, can you hear me? No. Could you repeat, please? Sure, definitely. The question is, and I'll repeat the question, how could we adapt the level of risk management to have an impact in common realities in a context of lack of equity that we share in Latin America and the Caribbean? We must consider, unfortunately, that we're talking about the region in which there's a lack of fairness, the highest lack of fairness in the world. First of all, good afternoon. I'm Carlos Zapata, as you've mentioned. I'd like to respond your question. When it comes to risk management in facing national disasters, I mean, in the system for social protection, we are driving forward new initiatives that will make front to the situation. Dominican Republic is an insular country in its phase of development. It is highly vulnerable to climate incidents or I'll just give you an example. Amidst the pandemic, it's been tangible. Amidst the pandemic, we faced a major storm and we had to constitute a cabinet that works for Social Security. We had to activate our protocols to intervene. When a specific situation or catastrophic event happens, the cabinet has a protocol it must implement. It must activate it to make front and to help or aid people which are highly vulnerable. Climate incidents and impacts due to climate change have an impact. That's why it's highly important for us to build and understand that there's a correlation between poverty and disasters. There's households that are under conditions of poverty and vulnerability. These people are highly affected due to their condition. They're vulnerable. to climate incidents or disasters that impact the vulnerable highly in their households and the well-being and their lives. They're vulnerable groups. They're frail, extremely frail when some climate disasters occur. Unfortunately, some households that have less capacity to economically make front to these disasters, the situation gets even worse because these households in poverty need to recover and to recover. I mean, if they, from the beginning, they don't have the protection of Social Security, they're exposed to be capable of leaving that economic situation. They have to work even harder to insert themselves. They have to face situations that put their lives at hazard and their incomes. The household's incomes depend sometimes on the environment and climate in the field, in agriculture, when we're raising livestock. In Dominican Republic, I mentioned this event, this natural disaster that's what's happened lately. Our fields were highly impacted amidst the crisis when trade, when our commerce was all closed, when the economy was closed, our agriculture, our fields were completely impacted. Our people were saying that we had a specific amount of food for food safety, that I mean, that's even at danger, when trying to export or provide and supply food to our country. There's other countries which are highly vulnerable, and one of our main business partners is Haiti. Now, as I've told you, the impact that we faced and climate has affected us. When we talk about Social Security and the affected households due to climate disasters, it makes us feel, in Dominican Republic, that we were powerless to make front to this. We are engaged to try to save our population under the framework and trying to meet the sustainable millennium goals. We are fighting our poverty. We're facing this. The cabinet's working on social security issues with the support of the World Bank, that has been the entity that sustains the development of our strategies to adapt the what's been drafted to our societies. We want to prioritize. We have an axis. We have created a scheme of programs, systems, and services that contribute and help us to develop the resilience of our poor, vulnerable population. When our population is facing threats because of problems in society and disasters, we're trying to work in articulation with different entities or agencies that constitute the Social Security system. The system, the national prevention system to pay the proper response and mitigate risks, has to work in synergy. Uh, you know, in compliance with its duties, roles, we're working in this effort with multiple sectors. That's like the key word here. We're working on the base ground, on the basis that's what sustain what we're drafting in its final stage. Thank you very much, Mr. Carlos Zapata. Thank you very much. We're grateful that you've solved the technical difficulties and you're now connected. Thank you for being present with us during this seminar. So it seems as if for me, it's about time to give room to ask the next question that's reference to being inclusive. And the focus of the question is inclusion. The question is, why or how has the crisis, the sanitary crisis with COVID-19, been a contributor to rethink being inclusive in the social programs that we have drafted for Latin America and the Caribbean? At least Ms. Elizabeth Riley, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. And within the Caribbean context, COVID-19 really struck at the heart of the economies of many of our countries, and that is the tourism industry. And when this is compounded by the protracted duration of the pandemic, it has resulted in a radical shift or change in the social and economic profile of many Caribbean states in just the space of a few short months. As an example, a senior official in Barbados this week indicated that 38,000 persons applied for unemployment benefits in 2020. And in the month of February 2021, 11,000 persons applied. And in the context of a population of 285,000, you can see that that is significant. So the reality is what we have seen in the Caribbean is that those persons requiring social protection support expanded significantly in the space of a few months, and it also expanded into groups which traditionally did not require social protection interventions. So what then does this mean? It means that we need to rethink how we are going to utilize our social protection mechanisms going forward. I think one of the critical things is there's a need for flexibility within the systems to be able to address the economic and social changes which are resulting from extremes. And in this case, it's a pandemic extreme, but we also saw something very similar post Irma and Maria in 2017 for the states that were significantly impacted. And what it meant is that those that were traditionally vulnerable required social protection, but then also those which could be considered as marginal. In other words, if there's any disruption in arrangements for their own livelihood, that they then fall into the bracket of those that require a level of support. In addition, I think the matter of the criteria which applies to categories for protection mechanism may also require a revisit. We saw, for example, with respect to vaccines, how prioritization of persons to be vaccinated it was a topic of conversation across the states, where the elderly, of course, were looked at, persons with non-communicable diseases, differently abled, etc. So the point I'm making is that we have to think differently on how we are applying our social protection mechanisms. We have to understand that the types of events that we're seeing now, whether they be climate related or whether they be linked to the pandemic in the case of COVID-19, it means that we are often finding ourselves in a scenario, certainly within the SIDS context in the Caribbean, of treating and addressing social protection needs for a much larger component of the population. And what then are those implications for strengthening social protection mechanisms so that they're able to rise to the occasion and respond at the times when needed? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. You're so clear. Thank you about making us rethink about our protection systems and schemes in the Caribbean. The floor is open for Ms. Lydia Fromm. Thank you so much. How do we rethink? How do we profit from this important time frame that we're living without president? It's the pandemic. Let's think out of the black box. Ms. Elizabeth just mentioned it. Let's rethink and think it over. I believe that the sanitary crisis has somehow helped us or driven us or moved us forward and or at the beginning to think. And we have started to rethink about how to continue amidst the situation and work with the services we have in commerce, the world of work, our labor work and communication. All of these elements have to be considered amidst confinement. I think we've taken a step forward. There's elements to consider. I think the social schemes have not been left behind. I mean, in just that moment in which we're thinking about the schemes and what we have to see the indicators and how to rethink and about what's important here. We have our laws, our regulations, what frames. We have to face also situations of lack of information. We have to use validated, fact checked information and make the information accessible. We have to add and incorporate the strategies to mitigate risks and manage risks as part of our policies, which are being drafted that are going to be present in our territories. We have to incorporate the risk management schemes as I've said. In the way our territories are ordered, we have to strengthen our institutions. The rule of law should be at all times present. And our institutions, as I've said, are responsible for social development. We have to strengthen that network that protects our societies. And if we strengthen the what we have done in our agencies and organizations, we have to work correctly in amongst our institutions. Okay, it's part of the management, and I think this is a key factor. We have to manage change, and by doing this, we have to ensure that communication is correct, that the spread of that communication is correct. We want societies to participate. I believe that the model that's based on different elements that integrated has to surge now at this time, and we have to think about how to answer how to face this new normalcy and strengthen governance at a local scale based on our experience in the project in which I'm part of to integrate Mesoamerica. I'll tell you that the information for that initiative is vital. And the process of focusing and concentrating to see how we're benefiting our people leads us to see where are our populations located, the settlements, where are they, who are they, and we can't achieve what we need to achieve if we don't have the proper geodata systems that helps us really with that uh, situation. No, thank you very much. The floor is open for Marina Cardelli, please. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to use the floor. No, we think that the management of risks, we know that disasters are not natural. We always say they're not, and the lack of equality is not natural either. When we talk about the lack of fairness or equality, we know that disaster becomes a disaster when people were vulnerable, as we've said before, when there was no anticipation before a risk and its impact. The lack of equality is not natural either. And the levels of lack of equality that we had in Argentina prior to the pandemic were the result of policies that were positive law in effect. We think that there's no neutral policies, and when the policies aren't inclusive, they just exclude. So when we think about the role that social policies played in articulation to other provisions that we have in Argentina to try to give the response back. In the past, we thought that with that, we were giving a response to emergencies and not just the sanitary emergency, food safety, housing emergencies, and different emergencies that we were facing simultaneously. And under these grounds, with the proper perspective, all politically speaking, this situation's had a cross-crop impact. Social security policies and, like, for example, what's being given as a benefit per child, or the benefits that people have when somebody is on leave, or the unemployment issues led us to work in the state. In Argentina, the government's fighting hunger or famine. It's part of our plans. There's a card that's used for, like, welfare purposes in Argentina that's been used since a year ago. In the pandemic, we're talking about that this program made us allocate millions and millions of pesos in budget. We have policies that are integrated or have an impact in the private sector, because and it affect pricing. The response to the sanitary emergency had to open the door for the Argentinian families that needed access to the service, that at many times couldn't go to work. And we had a policy implemented for pricing. There was economic contractions that had already affected our country years prior. Due to confinement, it affected formal sectors of our economy. And the Argentinian state had to take measures and execute them for SMEs, small and medium sized enterprises. We had a contribution or stimulation for the workforce and the employers. There was so much to do to contribute to the private sector. We worked along with them so they could pay off the wages of the workers, even if they were off, confined, without being in activities. We drafted or had policies that were implemented in the private sector in articulation with social security policies, in that correlation, so we could give coverage and make front to all the emergencies that we were facing amidst the pandemic for the workers, for the workforce, the subjects that are not regulated subjects. They have emergencies. They're facing issues with their income. We're talking about 9 million people in our population. That's a high percentage of our population in Argentina that has been affected. We have a policy that has had a great impact, historically speaking, in our nation. Being inclusive was not like an element of the policies that we gave response. uh, I mean, in this case, it was inclusion was the bedrock or the spirit of our laws and regulations. In our laws, we considered and thought about how to mitigate risks. We know that no one can save itself. No sector saved itself on its own. No sector saves itself today on its own, nor stakeholders can work on silos. We have to work and have drafted policies that are inclusive. Thank you very much. That's the bedrock. Thank you very much, Mr. Minor Mejia. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you so much. I'm sure that when we speak about including others, I mean, in that theme, we can discuss so much. What you've just expressed is extremely important. When we include, we have to analyze things with perspective. We have to understand that socially, we're all part of that, of our society, whether we're talking about labor, economics, having access to services. What do I mean by this? When there's such a lack of fairness in this country, I know it's difficult to be inclusive in all areas. People that don't have access to services are being excluded, and drafting schemes that include them is our objective. But amidst a condition of disaster, the responses that we have to give back, I mean, the responses will impact these people, letting them be the last. We have the mechanisms, we have ways to reach our population and include all our population in general terms and include them on social security. Social security has its principles, and the principle is equity. And another principle is the fact that it should be universal. 18% of our economics, our population that are economically active, is that the percentage? We have regulated subjects, unregulated subjects that are not. There's people that are not part of Social Security service, and more so with the subjects that are not regulated. With policies, we can broaden the coverage of the benefits of Social Security. But this happens through entrepreneurs, companies, the employers, and government. If these stakeholders have an interest of working for equity on Social Security and develop the benefits for Social Security, then we have ways to stimulate our economies in our countries. I think Social Security is basic, it's fundamental. When we speak about including or excluding, pardon, and I insist, when when our societies have vulnerable populations, such as the Guatemalan economy, our indigenous populations, 25% of our people or more don't have access to services. They will not have access to social security benefits. So we have to rethink about what the policies, the general policies that we draft. In the drafts, they should consider in the spirit social sustainability that can improve our countries. It's not just about social security, it's sustainability of our societies in general. That's why it's so important. That's what my previous panel member mentioned. All the strategic partnerships. We have to generate alliances coordinate our sectors. It's vital. It's important. We lived it. We're in a situation in which, in the immediate context, we weren't capable of giving the proper response. You know, we learned later on that our response was not probably the top response. That's why we have to go through this type of analytical process to understand other countries' experiences. In general terms, Social Security plays a crucial role in the development, a crucial role to include others, the population, the citizenship of a country. We can give more. We can have more representation of our societies in government, of our societies in government. We have to draft social schemes, broaden the coverage, have people be beneficiaries of the services and protect them. Broader coverage for kids, broader coverage during motherhood for kids, all the schemes to help the disabled, which are highly vulnerable in this country. Of course, we have to work on schemes, the increase of the fees that we have for Social Security and our well-being. Without this thorough change, I mean, how are we going to have social inclusion? We have to give an immediate response. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minor. I do believe that you set forward a very important point, which is actually being able to adapt and widen the social protection that includes social welfare in our models of mitigation and of response before disaster risks. I will give a brief comment. Previously, in meetings about disaster risk management, we saw that those people uh, present were social protection and the systems of risk management and humanitarian assistance, but social and protection and welfare were not there. So, luckily, in this virtual seminar, we are having this meeting where we have different sectors together to talk about this necessary response before the COVID 19 emergency. Having said this, I will give the floor to Mr. Carlos Zapata so he'll give an answer to previously referred question about social inclusion. Good afternoon. Well, I understand that the Dominican Republic, when we talk about social inclusion, it is impossible to neglect that we have an instrument that will benefit us to focus the indexes on the most vulnerable people. So the human, the unique beneficiary system without adding to what this system gives us, the country is was able to have a wider sight, at a country level where we were able to see and have a precise data given by this entity, the unique beneficiary system. And given the fact that we had this instrument, we were able to protect a little bit beyond. And we had programs that came from the social policy cabinet, such as the program Stay Home or Quédate en Casa. This program had a wider vision where we did not only have the tools that the citizen had, but also we were able to see this as a country, these people that were becoming elderly, those terminal diseases, those people with disabilities, these kind of people, the country had this kind of a tool. We did not only have this program, which was a conditioned transference, which was the stay home and other programs that were included in social protections as pilot programs in order to talk about social protection before COVID. Thank you very much, Mr. Carlos Zapata. Now, following our agenda, We're going to open our mics to the Mesoamerican Network for Disaster Risk Management, and they will give us a brief presentation on the integration and development of Mesoamerica program development program. So I will give the word to Mrs. Lydia Fromm. Thank you very much. Very briefly, and before we share the video, I would like to say that the member countries of this integration and development of Mesoamerica, which are 10 under the leadership of the permanent presidency by Mexico, the countries were able, with the support from Mexico, to establish an information system or georeferenced information system that allows to strengthen the integral management of risk management. It is in the web, and it has more than 1,440,000 layers of referential information. This was thanks to the financing of BID or IDB, in order to generate a regional service, which is called Red Mesoamericana de Gestión de Desastres. So we are complying or advancing in the goals, and we're producing instruments to monitoring threats and the timely management of risks. So the Mesoamerica project objective is to build consensus around common problems through shared solutions in these new sectors that have prioritized the summonings of the 10 countries. One of the prioritized areas is risk management, actually. So in this sense, we are searching the 10 countries to generate mechanisms and tools in order to generate and spread information about risk management, to reduce the vulnerability of Mesoamerica and protect the inhabitants, ecosystems, and the public infrastructure using this information platform that you're about to know. So this platform has had a very interesting evolution, because around 2004 countries agreed to generate a risk atlas, but around 2009, and considering that we have IT, we created the Mesoamerican system of territorial information with information from the 10 countries. But from 2014, we understood that we needed a network in order to have the georeferenced information that would be available for the citizenship. And then when the countries were validating and incorporating the layers of georeferenced information, we saw that this tool would even be so versatile to be used for the planning of territories and even for social policies, because it has different layers. It can also give us in a polygon what is the population of men, women, and children, where are the health centers, hospitals, or schools are. So with these, we are going to invite you to click on this link, and you'll be able to know this platform. And at the same time, we're going to leave you with an illustrative video. Thank you very much. Sorry, I do not have the audio from the video, so I think I will not be able to interpret it for you. Mom, sorry. I believe we have an audio issue, And Javier tells us that we should wait for a little minute. Mesoamerican Network for the Integral Management of Risks. The Mesoamerican region is subject to natural phenomena that frequently happen and destroy infrastructure and lives. The climate change will make this phenomenon more frequent in our territories. So, for example, there's no way to predict earthquakes. We only know that we have strong earthquakes, they will be repeated. So, only prevented countries are the ones that are going to be less losses. So actually, the bridge of communication between the Americas was formed due to the volcanic activity. They give life, but once in a while they provoke disaster and death. Disasters of great magnitude are a catalyzer for diverse phenomena of social order. They augment, they increase migration on equity. So this project recognizes the vulnerability in the region, and this is why we built a tool to unify criteria and indexes to evaluate the impact of those disasters and make decisions to prevent their effects. With the information of the countries, this system will continue to grow and evolve because we wish the authorities of the different levels of government, as well as the population, would have information about the phenomenon that will hit them, and also monitor phenomena as earthquakes and hurricanes, among others. And the phenomenons are not stopped by borders in our country. So the platform we develop has regional analysis on regions affected by tsunamis, tides, and storms, places with earthquakes or floods. Through an easy phenomenon selection, this system represents different scenarios that would allow us to understand the intensity and frequency of the phenomenon. Uh, this does not necessarily is available. This is not necessarily available for people, companies, or investors. With this platform, they will be able to evaluate the density of population by square kilometer, and so the urban growth to measure the speed and strength of winds. We would have observation satellites, and to know the activity of volcanoes recently, to monitor uh, crowds that may represent any risk. So we have to transform the social production of risk information and the production of knowledge of the risk. So this tool will help us doing this. Well, thank you very much for your attention to this brief video and presentation by this Mesoamerican Network for the Integral Management of Disaster Risks. This is a specific effort in the Central American zone, which has focused on being able to monitor the threats from natural origin that affect this region. And I believe that up to this, you've been able to talk about different points that are important on the table about the perspective of mitigation that would allow us to go forward towards a topic of social justice as well as environmental justice. And regarding risk disaster management, it has to go together with environmental justice. So we're going to open our microphone to the questions by our audience. And here we have several questions that we've received. So I'm going to start reading those. The first question, and feel free to ask for the floor if you think you would be able to answer the question. And also, if you consider if there are further questions to be made, please, we are receiving all your questions now. So the first question is, how would be able to make management of risks of disasters would not be only a political topic, but also technical and academical topic? Somebody from our panelists that wish to answer this question? Well, if you allow me, please go ahead, Minor. Well, thank you very much. Well, more academical and less political. Well, politics is in everything. So, but more academical, yes, through our universities. And this is a topic that is not very well spread. There's not information about this topic. So we have to boost this part. I consider that, as I previously said, Social Security may be a tool, an instrument to, talk about these kind of activities. But I understand that on our countries, we have national commissions for the reduction of disasters. Oh, with something like that, we would have to support this more and focus more on the preventive part and not only in the part of execution and operation when there is a disaster, because there is no formation on this kind of topics. And if the very little that we have, we see it very useless, and we have disasters. And let's not talk about the pandemic. That was something that really had us in a state of alert. I work a lot with labor, health, and welfare. Believe that the pandemic came to talk about the management of security, labor security, and we created this culture of labor security because workers are vulnerable to COVID. But previous to that, there was no consciousness, there was no awareness of labor illnesses. So COVID is a problem, true, but we took that situation in order to propagate and create this culture of professional health. The academia and the training in this kind of topics is fundamental. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minor. Somebody else from our panelists that wish to talk? I repeat the question. How would we do in order so that the management of disaster risks would not only be a political issue, but more technical and academical issue?
Yes, thank you, Sadima. I'm happy to take the question as well. Yeah, thank you for the question. And first of all, I fully agree with my fellow panelists with respect to the engagement of academia. Here in the Caribbean, we have reached out to and have significant partnerships with a number of the post-secondary institutions in the region, and most notably the University of the West Indies, which is in fact leading the conversation on strengthening the evidence basis for disaster risk management in our region. I wanted to touch a bit on the question of the technical level involvement, and it's an important question because if we say that building resilience is the responsibility of all sectors, private sector, civil society, etc., it means that within our enabling frameworks, we have to also reflect that responsibility. So within our area of operation, one of the things that we have looked at in the Model Comprehensive Disaster Management legislation is articulating the specific roles and responsibilities of particular line ministries within government. And this, in fact, brings the various technical agencies and the technical personnel associated with those agencies into the national structure, which looks at issues related to risk. In addition, I believe that there's a component of empowerment because there is not necessarily a feeling of comfort in working on risk and resilience issues when one is trained in other disciplines. So there is a requirement for us as the coordinating practitioners, whether it be SEDIMA at the regional level or national disaster offices at the national level, to also facilitate the types of sensitization sessions, knowledge building sessions for the various technocrats from the different disciplines, so that they become over time more comfortable in interfacing on discussing resilience issues within the national context. And finally, I wanted to mention that within our system, we have also embarked on an aggressive approach of integrating technocrats from across various ministries, also private sector and civil society, in programming for resilience through what we call our country work program process. And so our national emergency management offices coordinate with lead technocrats from various line ministries to work on identifying specific targeted results over agreed periods of time. And this, I think, over time will allow us to see significant changes in building resilience across the various ministries and amongst our technical counterparts. Thank you.
Take the floor. Yes, Mrs. Cardelli was going to talk. Yeah. Please, first of all, thank Elizabeth Rayleigh. Thank you very much. Then, now the floor is for Maria Cardelli. About this question, something very brief. Maybe I do not agree with the differentiation between the risk management as something political or something technical on the other hand. I believe, on the contrary, the technical and academical part of these are absolutely political. We need our countries, the public and private sector. There should be a lot of investment in technology, science, and innovation to perfect our risk management programs in order to have an early response system, and also to know the risks, in order to know the unequal impact of threats that our populations face. So that is to say, there's a lot of production from the academia. There's a lot of knowledge, technological knowledge, that may perfect our systems of management. And are those public policies, together with the private sector, together with the universities and the technological sectors, that will allow us to become these efficient risk management policies that are more integral every time. So we have to think of scientific and technological policies of quality, is thinking of public policies that will allow us to integrate these two worlds. That is what I wanted to say. Anybody else would like to say something, or may I take the floor? And once Mariana Cardelli has given an answer, I will give her a question that comes from the audience to her. I would only just to say something else that was already said by the colleagues, just by setting an example from a support in the regional level as a Mesoamerican project, and the leadership and support from our permanent president in Mexico. We tailored a course about risk management of disasters and climate change. And it was offered to teachers, professors of different majors in the Central American universities. And this was a very valuable contribution to incorporate to the current curricula important aspects for the management of threats. And by the same token, in this moment, and futurely, we'll be launching a course on risk management and the use of the platform that we saw in the video through through the Cooperasul, which is also a platform for the cooperation South-South and will allow us to strengthen capabilities regarding these topics. We have to keep in mind that there are political times and technical times, and we have to guarantee the convergence of both in order to go forward in the topics. Thank you very much. So I take advantage of to have a question to Mrs. Cardelli, how to involve the society and ministries in the strategies of integral perspective of risks in the Argentinian Republic. Well, two considerations about this. In Argentina, we have a national system of disaster risk management, which is a platform where many ministries participate in the areas that imply an answer before disasters. And the SINAGIR, which is this integral risk management and coordinated by from the Ministry of Safety and involves the Ministry of Health regarding the response to emergencies and the Ministry of Environment regarding the fire management and things regarding environmental policies, the Ministry of Social Development regarding all the social protections and vulnerable populations. So this implies the participation of all ministries. Nevertheless, with the response to the pandemic, the centrality of the strategy of response was by the Ministry of Health, and the rest of the ministries articulated ourselves through the SINAGI, and not only, but also through other instruments. But also regarding the participation of different social sectors, the truth of the matter is, beyond having a very active policy from all sectors of the states to summon actively in what we would call emergency committees through the territories, committees of emergency in the provinces. We made up a national emergency committee and municipal and regional emergency committees that would integrate the social organizations, the unions of different production sectors, the private sector, the NGOs, and all of those were summoned to this organization. Also, social, community, and union communities. They do not wait for a summoning to say what they think, but we have a very active listening committee. And so we had to give an answer to the poor neighbors, and the representatives of these places were the ones that were told us first how to come back to classes. Those that were aware of the way to give an answer to the workers so that they will receive their salaries along with the private sector and the organizations that would represent them, talking to the stakeholders, which were the ones that were going to receive the effects of these policies. And this was a model of risk management and a model of management of state policies, a dialogue. The agreement and governance is a little bit a way to facilitate the pathway and to start with a strategy of consensus for all the answer. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have very little time when we still have a lot of questions. So we are dealing with some trouble. But I wish to give the floor to Mr. Carlos Zapata and Mr. Minor so that they will give us an answer to a question that we have. So, how to add up the private sector in the policies of social security and social protection, considering the fact that the greater resource of their sector is a human resource. Thus, we have to protect it integrally within the management of risk of disasters. Thank you very much. Well, The current government has just compressed a law of alliance, a public and private alliance, where there are commitment from both parts for the intervention. Sorry, I think he's muted. We cannot listen to him. He has been to give an answer to this kind of risks. Otra vez. Once again, he's muted. There. So we went to this public and private alliance, and we saw it has been working when we talk about protection and risks, because in countries like ours, where governments are the ones interfering in social protection and included to the private part, I think it would be in the post COVID framework. It has been a strategic alliance. It has been fundamentally what came together to protect. He's muted again. To protect, given this alliance that the government had with the programs of Pati and Stay Home, which interfere with, which work together with the companies in Latin Republic, the Dominican Republic. Without this alliance, it wouldn't have been possible. Thank you very much. So, do you have anything to share with us, Mr. Miner? Yeah, very quickly, a very quick comment. I believe that promoting social security, first of all, we have to understand that social security, at least in my country, is mandatory. The fulfillment is mandatory. It's something that we have to comply with. If we're not complying with it, might be due to several reasons. It might be for political government issues or uh, workers or employers issues. So we have to understand that social security is the only social compensator that we have, and it's something that we have to defend and spread. We have to make the people aware. The unions have to be aware. It's not about having a greater uh, salary, but a minimal social protections, and all the sectors in the country have to be aware to affiliate to social security. Otherwise, we are not going to go forward a lot. And of course, the government sector to uh, comply with this regulation, because we have like an 19 or 20% of the economically active population. I think this kind of events that happen, this natural disaster of this pandemic, we see the importance of social security and welfare, not only from the medical point of view of medical assistance, but also from talking about the compensation, protection to children, so on and so forth. So this makes evident that social security is fundamental for us to have it. And to widen their coverage, that would be an immediate goal. But we have to be very aware from the workers, from the private sector, most of all, in that sector that still does not understand that social security is just as important to their workers, that will allow them to have a greater productivity, so that they will also understand it's a mandatory thing. And if it is not clear to them, there should be more policies that will foster these kind of things, because when we're not very aware of this, we have to have these um, pressure situations where we will force institutions to comply with this. So social security is a social compensator in Guatemala that we have to take advantage of. Thank you very much. And last, just to close with this virtual seminar, I will ask each and every one of the panelists would make a very brief comment to close this series of questions that have been answered. And I wish to address the closing, to think about how to make more effective the preparation of national mechanisms to mitigate the social, economical, environmental impacts of the natural dangers in our region of Latin America and the Caribbean. So, very briefly, just to finish with this, may I give the floor to Mrs. Elizabeth Rayleigh, and we'll continue in the order we've been participating, each and every one of us, to have the closure of our seminar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's been an excellent seminar. So my final word is that this is really a discussion about resilience. And within our Caribbean context, we identify 5 key areas that we have to look at in building resilience. That's social protection, looking at enhancing economic opportunities, safeguarding our physical infrastructure, issues of environmental sustainability and operational readiness and recovery. And we do believe that by integrating these elements of resilience into our policies, programs, and projects, that we will be well on our way to greater effectiveness in mitigating the social and economic impacts of natural hazards. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lydia Fromm, please. Thank you very much. I consider, just like Ms. Elizabeth Riley, that this seminar has been an excellent one. We've had the opportunity to discuss vital elements, and I'm very thankful. I thank the conference, the Inter-American Conference, and the president of the entity, and CELAC. Thank you for organizing and hosting and inviting our project of Mesoamerican integration to be part of this. The question is very important because now, and even more so, I'll say that the shared challenges lead us to face a dual and triple situation of what's happening. What we're doing jointly at a regional level amongst our economies is no longer an option. The context, practically, the pandemic itself and the situation we're living due to climate change makes it compulsory for us to work together. This is why these type of forums are so important. As a conclusion, that's the output of all of the aforementioned, is that we have to have open dialogue amongst our economies. We have to build networks. We have to have the right instruments, regional public instruments that enable us to share best practices, to understand the lessons learned. We need to strengthen the cooperation between our economies. In labor areas, we have to work under the premise of solidarity. That's why, as part of our schemes at a regional scale, we have to work to help countries to face the challenges and find ways to learn about what's happened. Thank you so much. Marina Cardelli, the floor is yours, ma'am. Please. Thank you very much. I'll be brief. It seems to me as if not only do we have to insist and debate more about the role that we have and the vulnerability in trying to have a scheme to make front or face disasters, we can speak much more. But what I'm going to mention, it's not just one dimension, it's not just one component. We have to work in an axis that's stronger. We know that the risks that our populations are facing have fundamentally are happening due to our society's vulnerability. It's the core, it's the backbone of the problems that we have in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's that vulnerability. So I welcome your initiatives. I think that what should be at the core, at the node of our debates, is social security. We know that incorporating this dimension in a scheme to make front to all the risks is fundamental. It gives us the feasibility to discuss the problems. With this, we can start articulating, correlating the schemes and forecast what's happening at a regional scale to integrate what we need to integrate in the spirit of our social policies. I must mention that every day we have a new opportunity, and that new opportunity leads us to redeem all our all the gaps. We can change the heading of everything we've done wrong if we are responsible. We are responsible of what we do for our countries. Furthermore, we're amidst a process. We're facing the pandemic. We know that there's going to be other waves in many economies. We have an opportunity now because the process of the vaccine strategies is now under current development, under great levels of unfairness. There's a lack of equality in vaccination. I know that every day, on our every day, in our experiences, there's a lot of debate. We're all responsible. We're responsible to discuss this, debate this at the table. Each time we should be capable of achieving efficacy in the response when we face disasters and emergencies that our people are living and we should prevent. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. The floor is open for Mr. Minor, please. Thank you so much. And before anything, I'd like to thank you for the invite. Social Security, I know that this institute is highly committed to these top subjects. You've moderated the panel beautifully. You intervened wonderfully. I thank you and the Inter-American Conference for the kind invite. My position, I know that all sectors, the scholars, the academic sector, the population, all stakeholders have a basic instrument. It's Social Security. And Social Security instruments lead us to strengthen and foster our activities. We need to be knowledgeable enough. Our instruments, these documents, don't have all the coverage. It's a social instrument, and it could be easily used to foster our type of actions. When we talk about managing disasters, I mean, it's something that leads us to think about how to mitigate the disasters in all the sectors to have a positive outcome. When we're facing the type of disasters that we faced currently, as I said at the beginning, it was difficult for us to understand what was happening. It was difficult to interact when we tried to give a response to the conditions. And right now we're paying a toll for it. However, we're on that heading, and these type of events raise awareness in all our institutions. We must, as institutions, have clarity. If we don't work together in this joint effort, we're not going to be capable of solving problems. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Carlos Zapata, the floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead. Well, first of all, thank you. I thank you for the invite on behalf of the cabinet. I'm representing the coordinator, the head. I'd like to thank CES, the SALAP, the entities, the conference, SALAP from Mexico. And I'd like to give you a round of applause because of the initiative that gave birth to the seminar. This seminar gives us light. It sheds light even if the themes we've been discussing about acts of God or the disasters amid social protection, and when we're facing risks, we know it's fundamental to anticipate and get ready in advance. As a matter of conclusion, the risk mechanisms that we have to be integrated. So we know that what makes it feasible for us to mitigate the impacts in our societies and our economics. What happens with the national disasters in our regions, we have to strengthen our entities. We have to be emphatic when it comes to mitigating and drafting the mitigation plan and have the monetary capacity, economic capacity to make front to it at a national scale and a higher scale. We need to take a step forward and intervene and take into account and consideration that by sharing best practices and lessons learned, we can find opportunities for improvement with a difference in our existing models. On behalf of the Dominican Republic, we thank you for having invited us. We expect for this to be repeated. Thank you very much. And as a conclusion, I'd like to tell you that today we're facing an opportunity. Historically, we have to rethink about how to mitigate risks. And in this plan, we have to have as a priority groups of our population which are highly vulnerable with the principles of Sendai. We have to have the full cooperation, participation of all the executive agencies, entities, bodies at all levels of government, local and on a national scale. We share responsibilities. Central governments share responsibilities. The authorities in different sectors, whether the sector is private or public. And we need to have all stakeholders participate. We need to mitigate social risks, environmental risks, thinking and knowing that the backbone of what we're doing are our people. Broadening our vision, we need to make front to disasters and risks in the environment. Thank you for the host. We'd like to thank the hosts. Thank you for sponsoring. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being present. We'll meet once again in a future seminar with SELAC, CD, SEDEMA, and other entities. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.